Telecameras 3 and 4 working. Activate radio contact with the outside.
Love, wisdom, abundant life. Live a life filled with meaning, purpose, and a sense of accomplishment.
Can you hear me?
Welcome to the Teachings of Enoch. I'm your host, James Allen. You can contact me, 702-483-7769. That's 702-483-7769. Or online at teachingsofenoch.com. Let's get started with today's message. Welcome to today's show. I'm James Allen, and my guest today is Tony Burke. Tony is Associate Professor of Religious Studies at York University in Toronto, Canada. And he's the author of Secret Scriptures Revealed, a new introduction to the Christian Apocrypha. Tony, thanks for appearing on the program today, and welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You wrote this book, Secret Scriptures Revealed, a new introduction to the Christian Apocrypha. I have to ask you, what is your interest in the Apocrypha, and how long have you had this fascination with doing research on the Apocrypha?
Well, I started to get interested in the apocryphal text when I was an undergrad student and taking biblical studies courses. I just started to get introduced to this material, and one of the reasons it was so interesting to me is because in my upbringing, which was Catholic, the material wasn't really talked about very much, well, at all, really. And when professors started to mention it in classes, I just got interested in this material and how it really enriched the investigation of the biblical texts. So you can learn a lot from, for example, what was chosen for the Bible by what was excluded from the Bible, in a sense.
Well, I remember when I was younger and people were talking, and I would try to share my faith, they would say, well, there's a lot of books that were hidden from the Bible, and how do we even know what you believe is correct? And when you press them, they really weren't sure themselves what these hidden books were all about, but it was just kind of an argument to be brought up. And one of the things, Tony, is the Dead Sea Scrolls and the discovery of those texts. And for so many years, those texts were kind of hidden away from the public. Only a certain amount of people could view those texts. And I think that kind of continued with the myth, as it were, that, well, yeah, people are trying to hide some of this material. What can you shed maybe some light on the going back to the Dead Sea Scrolls before we get into the more meat of the topic, what that discovery was and how it really shed light on early Christian followers, and why wasn't that information made available for so many years for us?
Well, the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were discovered in the 40s, here you have a collection of Jewish texts, both canonical, in the Hebrew Bible, and some non-canonical, so texts that are not found in the Hebrew Bible and Christian Old Testament. And there was a lot of intrigue in the time, a lot of controversy about how slow the process was in bringing that material to the public. So we had these conspiracy theories brought up and so on about these ideas of hiding this material. I think that the banal truth is that scholars just work very, very slowly. They have other things to do, and so things get put on the shelf, so to speak. I was just working on a text today that I first mentioned to people about 4 or 5 years ago, and I just haven't gotten around to finishing work on it. So I don't think there was really an effort to hide this material. In fact, when the material was published, it was discovered that it's very interesting and tells us quite a lot about early Judaism, but it doesn't say anything about Jesus. It doesn't rewrite history in any great way. It just adds nuance and depth. Now, when the other major collection of manuscripts was discovered shortly thereafter, and this is the Nag Hammadi library material, which is Christian material, the pace of scholarship there was also going quite slowly until a scholar named James Robinson took matters into his own hands and published fairly quickly facsimile editions, so copies, photographic copies of the manuscripts, so that everyone could see them. So things worked out much better with the Nag Hammadi library, but it was because of one scholar saying, this is going too slowly, and he made it available to everyone in that regard. And with our increased pace of information access these days, I think it's very hard for people to sit on things quite that long anymore, and things get published much quicker than they have before. So that's one of the benefits of our information age.
Tony, we're talking specifically on the program today about the Christian Apocrypha. There's a lot of Jewish Apocrypha as well. What really classifies something as Apocrypha writing in terms of the Christian world? What would be some of the terms or the classifications that would make something apocryphal?
The early church writers, as they're trying to develop which text should be part of their sacred collections of literature and which text should not, they came up with a variety of terms. And we generally see three categories of literature. Those texts that are canon, so therefore valued and represent the normative faith. Those texts which are outside of that category, which they would call spurious or lies, and then a middle category of material that there was some disagreement on. Some people liked it, some people didn't. Some people would say, well, okay, the material's okay, you can read it privately, but we're not going to use it for teaching. And the term apocrypha is sometimes used for that middle category, in the sense of hidden and secretive, meaning, read it at home. And sometimes it's used of the other category, which is don't read it at all. So the term apocrypha has taken on somewhat of a negative connotation. And even today, when we use it in a modern English, it's the sense of it's not true, it's not a true story, it's not an accurate story. So scholars of this material, we tend to like phrases a more value-neutral term like non-canonical. It's not within the canon, rather than the term apocryphal. But I don't mind the term myself. I think people have come to accept it as connected with this literature. And originally, it was not a pejorative term. It's not a negative term. It just simply meant secret. It just became a negative term within the writings of the Orthodox Church Fathers. So those are the basic terms we're dealing with: canonical and non-canonical, scripture, and apocrypha. Those are the types of categories.
My guest today on the show, Tony Burke. Tony is Associate Professor of Religious Studies at York University in Toronto, Canada, and he's the author of Secret Scriptures Revealed, a new introduction to the Christian Apocrypha. I'm James Allen. You're listening to the teachings of Enoch. We'll be back right after this.
You got to be careful where you buy your Bible at, too. Because I was at the Dollar Tree. It wasn't the King James Version. It was the Rick James Version. So when I realized I had purchased an irregular Bible. I didn't even know they made an irregular Bible. You don't know how hard it is to try to convince a woman you are a man of God and you got a Rick James Bible. It's like, ooh, Bone, I want to study the book of Revelations. Let's talk about the rapture. When Jesus coming back? Baby, my Bible don't go that far. We need to study over here when Moses split the Burgundy Sea. The Burgundy Sea, I told you my Bible got issues. My Bible going through some stuff. Now, do you want to finish reading about Adam and Edna?
Oh, give me that old time religion. I want that old time religion. I want that old time religion. It's good enough for me. Make me love everybody. It will make me love everybody. It'll make me enough for me. I want that religion that my mother had long time ago. I want that religion my father had long time ago. I want that religion my sister had long time ago. It's good enough for me. Hey, oh, my religion, yeah, yeah, yeah. I feel happy. Well, oh, my religion, and it's good enough for me.
I'm talking with Tony Burke. Tony is Associate Professor of Religious Studies at York University in Toronto, Canada, and the author of Secret Scriptures Revealed, a new introduction to the Christian Apocrypha. I'm James Allen, and you're listening to the Teachings of Enoch. Tony, there's quite a bit of Christian Apocrypha. Can you give us an idea of how much really there is? I mean, it's more than just, say, 20 or 30 pieces of books. What's all involved?
Yeah, there's quite a lot of text. I think many of your people in your audience and many people in the wider public are aware of a handful of these because they've made the news. So the Gospel of Thomas, for example, which is various sayings of Jesus, the Gospel of Judas, Gospel of Mary. These are the ones I think most people are aware of because of, having seen or read the Da Vinci Code and other popular representations of these texts. But there's a huge number of texts beyond that don't often get a lot of attention. Previous collections and introductions to apocryphal literature were similar to my own book. Tend to focus on texts that we think were written in the 1st to the 3rd century, so before the New Testament was really put together in the 4th century. And I really wanted to widen the scope in this book to include texts that were written after that time. And apocryphal texts have continued to be written over the centuries, from the 1st century even up to today. Really, we have modern apocryphal texts. People will publish a text claiming that it was revealed to them by an angel or that they found it somewhere. The phenomenon continues even to today. So a large number of texts, and I divide the material in my book into 3 categories, just to give you a sense of the breadth. And the first category is texts that are about Jesus' earthly life, so from his birth to around the time, to the end of his teaching career. And then a second category is passion and resurrection texts, so texts that deal with Jesus' death, crucifixion, and his resurrection, and then resurrection appearances. And then the third category is legends of the early church, and these are stories not of Jesus, but of people within his orbit. So his family, so his mother, his father, Joseph, the apostles, various texts called the Acts of the various texts called the Acts of the Apostles. So Acts of Thomas, Acts of Peter, Acts of John, etc. And some stories about Mary Magdalene, some stories about Judas. So really a wide assortment of texts, and again, written from maybe as early as the late 1st century. And when it comes to ancient texts, which I prefer to cover in the book, till around the 10th century. But then again, the texts that are written after the 10th century into today.
Now, Tony, in the early writings, over the years, we've seen some people claim, hey, I found this document, this manuscript, and it's been turned out to be a fraud. How do we know that these texts are valid? How do we go about scientifically proving these were written at this particular time? What's some of the scientific process that you guys go through to make sure this is valid?
The best circumstances for finding an ancient text is to find it in an archaeological site. So, say in Egypt or in the Palestinian deserts, because it's clearly been in the ground for a long time. You dig it up. It's placed. You may find texts in there that are placed next to coins which have dates on them or something. Certainly, it's been in the ground for a long time. It's clearly we we have a text from ancient times. And then when we look at the manuscripts that are found in such locations, we can look at the style of writing and the style of book construction and connect it to manuscripts that we do know the dates for. So, for example, if we have a manuscript that we know was written in the second century and a manuscript we know was written in the 3rd century, we look at our new manuscript and we see what it looks the most like, and therefore we are able to date it fairly accurately as a result. So, for example, we have some pages from the Gospel of Thomas which were found in an archaeological site in Egypt, and by looking at the features of these manuscripts, we can date them to the late 2nd century. Now, other manuscripts that are found in libraries, monastic libraries, the process is somewhat similar. They tend not to be very early because they've been copied over the centuries, and the old copies get thrown away. But for the most part, we can rely on the scholars who go to these libraries and find them to do their job correctly and accurately tell us the dating of the manuscript, where they found it, etc. And for the most part, these manuscripts are available for other scholars to look at. But the classic case of a problem of perhaps a forged text is a text called the Secret Gospel of Mark. And here's a text that a scholar found in a library in Palestine, in Israel, and he made a copy of it, photographs, and then a transcription, and published it and translated it. And a lot of people didn't like the text because what it purports to be is a longer version of the Gospel of Mark that was around in at least the late 2nd century. And a lot of people didn't like the scholar either, for that matter. So they accused him of forging the text, of creating it himself. So there's been a lot of talk in the past, I think it's about 30 years since its publication, of this text being a forgery. And the scholars weigh in on both sides of this debate. Some think it is authentic. Some people think it's a forgery. The main problem with being able to test this manuscript is that it's no longer available. He took photographs of it, but it's become lost. We think it's because the people from the library don't want anyone to see it. They don't like the controversy. They don't like the attention, so they've just conveniently lost it. But if we're able to find it, we could do some scientific tests on it and determine whether it's authentic or not. And one other thing, I don't want to go too long, but another example right now, very, very topical, is a fragment of text called the Gospel of Jesus' Life, which has been talked about for about a year or so now.
Yes, and the scholar, she was speaking here in Las Vegas recently, and I invited her on the show, but she had declined. But yeah, what's some of your thoughts on that?
Well, it's what is it? A business card size piece of papyrus with about 4 or 5 lines of text on it in Coptic. It says very little. There's a bit of a discussion between Jesus and the disciples, and there's at one point Jesus says, "My wife," and then the sentence is cut off. Now, again, a lot of debate over authenticity of this text. Again, mostly because people within the faith don't like the text. They don't like to know of a text that says Jesus is married. They assume it's a forgery, and without even really providing scientific basis for it. But what the scholar who was given this text by a collector, her plan was to test it scientifically, and it's taken quite a long time for that process to finish. But apparently, the scientific tests are in, and this will soon be formally published, and we'll see what the tests show us. But again, the people who will always want it to be a forgery will say that the tests are in some case in some way invalid. For example, if the tests say that there's no traces of modern ingredients to the ink, well, someone will say, well, of course, the person has created ink that is like ancient ink. So there will always be a counter argument. But we only really know whether a text is authentic or not authentic with really the passage of time, with more and more scholars working on it and trying to understand it and trying to place it within its appropriate context, whether it's modern or whether it's ancient. And eventually, I think cool heads will prevail. But it can take a considerable amount of time, particularly if the scholars are are biased either toward wanting it to be real or wanting it to be fake. So it's hard sometimes to break down those walls that scholars have around their own belief system.
I'm a big fan of the Bible. I mean, who wouldn't be? It's in most hotel chains. I have one, probably two. I know I have a non-reading one in our living room. It's beautiful. It's right underneath our plaque that says, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." I'm such a fan. I became a fan of the Bible on Facebook. Big fan.
Oh, yes.
Blessing and honor, glory and power, be unto the Ancient of Days. From every nation, all of creation, bow before the Ancient of Days. Every tongue in heaven and earth shall declare your glory. Every knee shall bow at your throne. In worship you will be exalted, O God, and your kingdom shall not pass away, O Ancient of Days. Oh, blessing and honor, glory and power, be unto the Ancient of Days. From every nation, all of creation, Lord divine, bow before the Ancient of Days. Every tongue in heaven and earth shall declare your glory. Every knee shall bow at your throne, my Lord. In worship you will be exalted, O God, and your kingdom shall not pass away, O Ancient of Days. O Ancient of Days.
My guest today on the show has been Tony Burke. Tony is Associate Professor of Religious Studies at York University in Toronto, Canada, and he's the author of Secret Scriptures Revealed, a new introduction to the Christian Apocrypha.
What's going on? What are they stopping for?
Love, wisdom, abundant life. That's my hope for you. You've been listening to the Teachings of Enoch. I'm James Allen, your host. You can contact me 702-483-7769. That's 702-483-7769. Or online at teachingsofenoch.com.